There are a lot of cancers that can be caused by viruses. So viruses, let's first talk about cancer. What's cancer? Cancer is a tumor, right? Tumor grows. It's where your own cells decide to start growing again. Now, most of the time, replication is regulated by your body. At the beginning of conception and growth, you need cells to replicate and form a heart. But then once that heart is formed, the replication is turned off. We don't make any more heart cells once we get that formed. Once we get a kidney formed, replication is turned off. Some cells will continue to replicate continuously throughout your life, like our epithelial cells, like our hair cells and other things like that. The mucous lining of your mucous membranes, those will continue to replicate all our life, but most of our cells will get to a point and then the replication is turned off and cells don't continue to replicate. So that's what happens. Now, in order to stay off, there are some regulations that are in place. And sometimes those genes that are involved in regulation can have mutations. And those mutations will turn that replication machinery back on, and your own cells will start growing again. And then you get a tumor in your kidney. So that is cancer. It may stay in your kidney, and that's fine, be slow growing. Those are kind of benign growths. Or it can break off. Some of those cells that are still replicating can break off, be carried through your circulatory system, your lymphatic system, into your lymph nodes, and carried through your whole body, and then they can land somewhere and replicate there, and that's called metastatic cancer, where you've got another tumor that will start to grow in another place, but the cells came from that original tumor. All right, so cancer, a lot of different cancers. We're still struggling on how to treat those well. We've had a lot of success in treating those, and we'll only continue to get better for that. We've also found that there is a connection between viruses and cancer. You remember I said that those genes were regulating it and they can get mutations? We've found that some viruses can make those mutations happen faster. The genes that are involved in regulation are called oncogenes, and then if you get that virus, they will make mutations in those oncogenes, and then they turn the replication machinery back on and you get a cancer. All right, so some viruses can do that. So so we define oncogenes. Those are cancer-causing genes, and then the viruses can be termed oncogenic, meaning that they can turn off those oncogenes and allow replication to occur. And this is also called transformation, when a virus can transform a cell into something different and it will continue to replicate when it shouldn't. An example of this is the HPV, human papillomavirus. You guys have probably heard about the vaccine for HPV Gardasil. It's recommended for 11 to 12-year-olds, and it protects us from being infected by HPV. And again, viruses, we use a lot of vaccines to protect us against virus because it's so hard to get drugs that can target a virus. So a vaccine exposes us to that virus, allows our body to make antibodies so that when we really come in contact with the real virus that's going to cause us damage, our immune system is already primed and ready to go, and we can fight it off before it causes the damage that will cause a disease in our signs and symptoms. For that. So we give a vaccine against that HPV. Now, human papillomavirus is not a bad virus at the beginning. It's one of those that you may get infected, you may get some little symptoms, and you don't even know you have it. You never get diagnosed because you never end up going to the doctor because it's the initial primary infection is so mild. Problem is that it stays and it will make mutations in those proto-oncogenes, and then you can have cancers develop much later. The mutations don't happen all at once. It happens over a period of time. These persistent effects happen over a period of time, and then maybe 5 years later, 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, you get enough mutations that you get a tumor forming, that the genes that the cells start replicating and forming a tumor. And it's numbers-wise, cervical cancers, so tumors that originate in the cervix, in the female cervix, 98% of them are caused by this human papillomavirus. So if we can prevent contact with that HPV, with that human papillomavirus, we can prevent these cancers happening in their 20s and 30s and so on. This virus is easily shared. It's easily shared by sexual contact, not necessarily penetration, but a lot of different types of sexual contact. So if we get an individual vaccinated before any type of sexual activity, we can keep them from getting infected with this HPV. It'll give them those antibodies responded to from the vaccine. They won't get HPV. All right, so that seems like a great deal, but it's been kind of a hard sell. It's come into the market where the trust in the medical community has been eroded due to some erroneous, and we'll have a whole lecture on that when we get to that, some erroneous facts about the MMR, the measles vaccine causing autism. It doesn't. It has been proven over and over again that it does not cause autism. Many different studies have been done. Many different places have done these studies. It does not cause autism, but it started a trend of questioning vaccines. And it's always good to question medical treatment. You should always get second opinions and good advice. But now people are getting their advice from their neighbor and their Facebook group, and they're people who aren't necessarily qualified to give advice about this. And so it's really started an anti-vaccine total movement that's thrown out a lot of misinformation. And so people are very wary about vaccines. I get that. Again, do your research. Just do your research with reputable sources is all I'm asking for that. So Gardasil came out into that type of mentality. It's also recommended for 11 to 12-year-olds. We're trying to get them before any type of sexual activity. Doesn't do good, once you've had some sort of sexual contact, doesn't do any good there. You're probably already infected with it. It's very prevalent in our culture. But parents coming in with an 11 and 12-year-old, the last thing they want to think about is sexual contact. And so that's kind of a difference. It's a different vaccine in that protects us against getting the virus, but it's not the virus we're worried about. It's the after effects of the virus. So instead of telling parents, oh, I'm protecting your child from getting measles, which can happen immediately, you're protecting your child against a virus that's sexually transmitted, and it will protect them 10 years from now when all the various effects that happen. And it's just been a hard sell for that. So do your research. There's a lot of great scientifically sourced articles out there about these vaccines, but that's one that's in this category, and that's why we're trying to do that. We're preventing those cervical cancers. It's not just cervical cancers. 98% of cervical cancers, so that's pretty big, but there's some other big numbers on vaginal cancers, penile cancers, throat cancers, other things like that can be affected with this. Okay, so that is those two things, and we'll pick up with the next video. Thanks.